She's just helping, my husband said as his mom babysat our daughter. I trusted him. One day I came home early to find my baby bruised, gagged, and shaking. I'm Carol Harrison. This particular morning, during springtime in the Boston suburbs, I was enjoying my usual cup of coffee, watching the blossoms in the garden from inside my house. Even though I'm 62, the quiet of the morning still energizes me every single day. Grandma, can we go to the park today? My grandson Aiden came dashing down the stairs and into the kitchen. His bright blue eyes were filled with glee. Certainly, Aiden, but first we should eat a good breakfast. For an 8-year-old, Aiden's an incredibly bright and thoughtful kid. He shares the same inquisitive nature as my son Mark and his wife Sarah. As I was getting ready to head to the park with Aiden after our meal, I heard the front door open. Hey, Mark. About Aiden's tutoring. Sarah, that's enough, not now. I could hear Mark and Sarah arguing. They're in the middle of a divorce right now, and they're battling over who will get custody of Aiden. It breaks my heart, but I have to stay calm in front of Aiden. Good morning to you both, I said brightly. Oh, good morning, Mom, Sarah quickly forced a smile. Mom, thanks for watching Aiden today, Mark said wearily. The strain between them was almost unbearable. Dad, Mom, I'm going to the park with Grandma, Aiden yelled with lots of enthusiasm. Be careful, Aiden, Sarah said with a sweet smile. Have a great time, Mark smiled a little bit as well. When we arrived at the park, Aiden immediately ran towards the playground. The sunshine of the season made his light-colored hair sparkle. Aiden, don't wander off too far, I called out from the park bench where I was sitting. All right, I understand, he replied, turning back and giving me a wave. I started reading the book I'd brought with me, enjoying it while keeping a casual eye on Aiden. The joyous sounds of other kids playing nearby filled the air. It was shaping up to be a perfect Saturday afternoon. Grandma, can you give me a push on the swing? Aiden came dashing over to me. Certainly, sweetie. We took turns swinging, then we constructed a sandcastle in the sandbox. The time just flew by because we were having such a great time. I'm feeling a little parched. I'll go get some juice, so just stay right here, all right? Sounds good, he answered. As I walked toward the vending machine, Aiden carried on playing in the sandbox. Only a few moments passed. When I came back, Aiden wasn't in the sandbox anymore. Aiden, where are you? I searched everywhere, but I couldn't see him. My heart began to pound like a drum. Aiden, I desperately searched throughout the entire park. Other parents started helping, but we still couldn't locate Aiden. Fear gripped me. With my hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mark. Mark, it's Aiden, I can't find him anywhere. In that instant, my world began to fall apart. When Mark arrived at the park, I was sitting on the bench, my face buried in my hands. I heard his footsteps coming closer. Mom. Mark's voice had an urgency I'd never experienced before. Where's Aiden? I relayed what had happened, crying as I spoke. Mark's face became somber. Did you already call the police? Yes, I did. Before I could even finish speaking, we heard the blare of police sirens. 2 police cars pulled up to the park's entrance and officers in uniform got out. Are you Mrs. Harrison? One of the officers asked as he came towards us. Can you please fill us in on what happened? As I was telling the officer what had occurred, Sarah showed up, gasping for air. Aiden, where is Aiden? Her voice was shaky. Mark quickly told her what had been going on. Sarah looked at him, then at me, and for just a second I thought I saw accusation in her gaze. But that feeling went away quickly and her expression shifted to one of resolve. Let's go look for him, he can't be far. The police got right to work. They searched the park, talked to people who lived nearby, and looked at the security cameras. We also separated, yelling Aiden's name while we searched everywhere in the park. As the minutes ticked by, the sun began to dip below the horizon. Mark looked exhausted, but he kept searching without taking a break. Sarah, who had been frantically searching, eventually began to slow down. Sarah, are you okay? I asked when I spoke to her, and she turned around looking a little surprised. Oh yeah, just a little tired. At that point, I noticed something odd about her eyes, a strange light, but there was no time to think about it. Once it was dark, the police set up a command center. We answered questions and gave them pictures of Aiden. One of the investigators came over to us. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, is there anyone who might have a problem with your son? Mark shook his head. No, everyone loves Aiden. I know you're dealing with the divorce process. Sarah spoke abruptly on that topic. Do you think we're somehow involved? The officer, keeping his cool, said we have to look at every angle. That night, not a single one of us could get any sleep. Guilt wouldn't leave me alone. I'd only looked away from him for a split second. The search area broadened the following day. People volunteered, and Aiden's pictures were everywhere in town. Mark was working hard, but I started picking up on slight shifts in Sarah's demeanor. Sarah, should we also look in the southern area? When Mark asked that, Sarah paused before responding. Yes, but I don't believe Aiden would have traveled that far. Those words made me uneasy. There seemed to be something other than worry in Sarah's eyes. On the search's third day, the police had an update. They found security camera footage of a car that looked suspicious near the park. They're currently trying to track down that vehicle. This information gave us a bit of optimism, but Sarah's reaction was peculiar. For a second, her face seemed to lose all its color. "Are you all right, Sarah?" Mark inquired, concerned. "Yes, I'm simply exhausted." I stared silently. The notion that she could be concealing something began to creep into my thoughts. 5 years have flown by since Aiden vanished. The years have gone by relentlessly, the seasons have cycled through, and our lives have changed slowly but certainly. Each year on Aiden's special day, our family comes together to silently pray in front of his picture. This year would have marked his 13th birthday. As I looked at the photograph, the innocent smile on the table caused me to deeply exhale. I released a long, heavy sigh. "Mom, could you use a refill on your coffee?" Mark asked from the kitchen. "Yes, I would," I replied. Mark had thrown himself into his job. Maybe this was his way of avoiding the pain, or maybe he was trying to get away from everything. The exhaustion was always so visible beneath his eyes, and smiles were rare for him these days. "How are things going, Mark?" I gently inquired. He just shrugged his shoulders. "Same as always, just work, work every single day." I detected a touch of giving up in his tone. At the same time, Sarah had started acting differently, little by little. At first, I thought I was just overthinking things, but I began to sense that something wasn't right about her actions. I noticed Sarah trying to leave the house in a rush one day. "Sarah, are you going somewhere?" I asked. "Yes, just a quick errand," she said vaguely as she hurried out the door. These quick trips had become more frequent. When I inquired about where she was going, her answers were unclear. Also, her phone usage had shifted. She'd go to a corner to speak in hushed tones or abruptly end calls when we got near. I saw her quickly end a call when she saw the name on her ringing phone screen. "Sarah, is something bothering you?" I decided to ask her directly one day. "No, not at all," she responded with a fake smile. Though she spoke, there was no joy in her eyes. The most unexpected thing occurred during supper one night. "I have an idea, maybe we should think about relocating," Sarah announced out of the blue. Mark stared back at her, taken aback. "What prompted this so suddenly?" "I was just thinking a new environment might do us some good." There was a sense that there was more to this than met the eye. This home is full of reminders of Aiden. It felt strange that Sarah would so easily suggest leaving all that behind. One night while I was alone in the living room, I heard Sarah's steps coming down the stairs. She had her coat on and was holding her keys. "Sarah, where are you headed so late?" She hesitated for a second. "Oh, just a quick chore, I'll be right back." As I heard the door shut, my doubts grew stronger. What was Sarah concealing? And did it connect to Aiden's vanishing? As Sarah's strange actions continued, my days were filled with worry and mistrust. 5 years had slipped by since Aiden vanished, and even though hope was dwindling deep down, I still held on to the conviction that he was somewhere, still living. One peaceful afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, using the computer to scan old family pictures. As I worked, lost in these nostalgic memories, an unfamiliar icon suddenly appeared on the screen. "What's this?" I wondered. I clicked on it, and a video call window popped open. Showing up was the face of a boy, his expression scared, in a poorly lit room. It was Aiden. My voice shook. That kid on the video was definitely my missing grandson. I remembered when he vanished from the park. 5 years had passed, and the signs of growing up were starting to appear in his young face. "Grandma," Aiden's voice whispered, "help me, it's dark and frightening here." I sucked in a breath. "Aiden, is that really you? Where are you?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice trembling. "But Mom is lying, she's the one keeping me here." Those words hit me hard, a part of me just shut down. "Sarah." "What do you mean, Sarah?" Aiden looked around nervously before continuing in a quieter tone. "Mom makes me do pictures. There are scary people here too. I'm not allowed to go outside." All of a sudden, I heard a door open far away. The blood seemed to drain from Aiden's face. "Mom's back. Grandma, please help me, but don't tell anyone." With that, Aiden quickly ended the video call. The screen went black, and I was left there, stunned. My mind was completely scrambled. Aiden was alive, which was unbelievable. But the circumstances were even more terrible than I had imagined. And the most unbelievable part was that Sarah was connected to all this. My hands shaking, I grabbed my phone to call Mark. However, I paused. Aiden had told me not to tell anyone, but I couldn't just leave things as they were. Taking a deep breath, I made up my mind. To get Aiden back, I had to be careful, but also take action. Something told me that this video would change everything. The video from Aiden left me completely shaken, but I realized I couldn't fall apart. Despite feeling incredibly distressed, I understood I needed to get myself together. "Aiden, we really had to be cautious about our next move." The following day, I reached out to John Brown, a friend of mine for many years who used to be a police officer. I figured he'd grasp the gravity of what was going on and offer some sound guidance. "Hey John, it's been a while," I said, feeling a mix of memories and worry in his tone. Taking a deep breath, I explained to him about everything that had happened in Aiden's video. He listened quietly, but I could hear him breathing a little heavier. This is a major deal. We need to be really careful, John said with increased seriousness. First, we need to closely examine Sarah's recent actions. Following John's direction, I started doing my own digging. I began keeping track of Sarah's outings, how often she was on her phone, and the places she'd been going lately. After a few days of watching her, I found out that she was frequently driving to a warehouse area out in the suburbs. Therefore, one afternoon, I decided to trail her. My pulse was pounding as I saw Sarah's vehicle stop in front of a dilapidated, ancient warehouse. After making sure she went inside, I carefully walked up to the building. Looking through a window, I could see Sarah speaking to someone. I couldn't make out who she was conversing with, yet Sarah's face wasn't the typical gentle one she usually displayed. Instead, it appeared harsh and scheming. That observation transformed my doubts into a sure thing. Sarah could have concealed Aiden 100 different ways, but why would she do such a thing, and did Mark have any idea about this? When I got home, Mark had only just gotten back from his job. Looking at how exhausted he seemed, I paused, yet I realized I had to tell him everything. "Mark, we should chat," I started cautiously. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, meeting my gaze. He looked at me a little worn out. I told him about Aiden's video message and Sarah's odd actions. I could see Mark's expression slowly shift. "No way, Sarah." Mark's tone had a blend of shock and uncertainty. "Mom, couldn't this all be a misunderstanding?" "I wish it was," I replied in a low voice because of Sarah's recent conduct. Mark slumped into a chair. "I can't believe it, but if it's true." Observing a firm resolution in his eyes, I felt a bit of comfort. No matter how much the truth might sting, we had to find the strength to confront it. "Mark, let's get Aiden back together." I put my hand on his shoulder. Mark nodded slowly. "Yes, we'll track him down. And if Sarah actually is involved," his words drifted off, but our plan was made. To save Aiden and bring the truth to light. That turned into our purpose from then on. During our collaborative examination, startling revelations arose, one after the other. Working with John, we delved into Sarah's history, uncovering her long-term battles with mental health problems. The strain of the divorce seemed to be the catalyst that caused a swift decline in her state. Mark, his voice trembling, revealed that Sarah had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but she refused to get help. By examining Sarah's habits, we confirmed her frequent visits to the warehouse outside of town. Therefore, we chose to keep a close watch on that particular place. One afternoon, shortly after Sarah left the warehouse, we were able to sneak a look inside. We were completely stunned by what we found. The walls were plastered with an enormous amount of pictures, all featuring Aiden. But a lot of them had been taken after Aiden went missing. Impossible. Mark's complexion became ashen. A deeper search revealed that Sarah had fabricated Aiden's abduction and had been concealing him all along. Her journal included entries describing her yearning for revenge against Mark and a twisted affection for Aiden. "Only I comprehend. Aiden belongs with me. Mark shouldn't be the one raising him." These words were written in sloppy, almost illegible handwriting. We also figured out how Aiden had been able to get in touch with me. Sarah had provided him with a tablet for his schoolwork. Yet, bypassing her supervision, Aiden had succeeded in sending me a message asking for assistance. He recalled me as the only grown-up he could believe. That's why he contacted me. "Aiden, he was actually alive this whole time," Mark said, tears running down his face. But we couldn't savor our happiness for very long. Aiden was still being manipulated by Sarah, and she wasn't thinking straight. We had to get him out of this situation fast. "We ought to tell the authorities," I replied firmly, "but we've got to be cautious." We didn't know what Sarah was capable of. We agreed silently. Aiden's well-being was our absolute focus. We got ready to hand over all the proof we'd collected to the police. "Aiden, we're on our way," I thought to myself. "We'll get you out of this." After a lengthy conversation with the police, the day of the rescue finally came. Before dawn, a police squad with a specialized team included headed to the warehouse. Mark and I were instructed to stay at a spot a little ways off. "Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison," the lead detective announced to us, "please stay here until we clear the building." As we waited, my anxiety grew. Police cars steadily closed in on the warehouse. My pulse was racing. Suddenly, sirens screamed, and officers stormed into the warehouse without hesitation. "Police, freeze!" Right after that order, a scream rang out. It was Sarah's voice crying, "Let him go, Aiden is mine." A few minutes later, the officers started to leave the warehouse. "And there was Aiden," Mark exclaimed. Even though he looked weak and his face showed he was scared, it was definitely our Aiden. He was being carried out by an officer, and as soon as he saw us, tears streamed down his face. "Grandma, Dad." We rushed towards him and held Aiden close. 5 years is a long time, and when we saw each other again, we didn't know what to say. Sarah was being led away by the officers behind us. It was clear she wasn't truly aware of what was happening. Her gaze was blank. The detective informed us that Sarah would be assessed by a psychiatrist. Also, they would take legal action, keeping her mental state in mind. Aiden was shaking in my arms. "Can we go home now?" he asked. I replied softly, "Yes, it's all going to be okay. Let's get out of here." While the ambulance transported Aiden to the hospital, Mark and I held his hand the entire time. It was like, finally, after enduring a seemingly endless and gloomy period, we could see a glimmer of hope. I knew the journey ahead of us would be tough, however. We made a commitment to face it together as a family. With that commitment, we got ready to start a new beginning. Since Aiden's rescue, a few months have already gone by. After her psychiatric examination, they determined Sarah had a serious bipolar disorder, and she would be ordered to receive treatment in a mental health facility instead of being incarcerated. Her reasons turned out to be a combination of spite towards Mark and a warped sense of a mother's love, which led her to want to have Aiden all to herself. During the trial, it came out that Sarah had raised Aiden like he was exceptional and that she had been selling his pictures online. Aiden described how he was able to reach me. He had been given a tablet by Sarah for school online, but her monitoring was not very good. He thought of me as the only adult he could depend on and sent the message when he had a chance. Coming back home, Aiden's path to getting better was difficult. He would frequently be jolted awake by bad dreams, and interacting with people scared him. But Carol and Mark Peyton were there for him always. Thanks to professional therapy, he slowly started to get back to his normal routine. When Aiden smiled just a little one day, it gave us hope. The family connection, even though it had suffered, was certainly getting better. Even though there's still a long way to go, we'll get through it as a family. We're doing it for Aiden's sake. We were celebrating Aiden turning 14 a year after he was brought home. There was a homemade cake on the table, and the room had bright balloons. Although you could still see some lingering fear in Aiden's eyes, they were also sparkling with hope. "Grandma, Dad, thank you," Aiden said, his voice full of thankfulness. Sarah was under strict medical care to ensure we wouldn't be threatened again. Aiden, showing great courage, was confronting his painful experiences, going to therapy and continuing to recover. And then on that day, he made a big announcement to us. "I want to volunteer with the foster care system," he told us. "I want to help kids like me." Hearing those words, wanting to help other kids, Mark and I couldn't help but get emotional. Aiden, who dealt with so much pain, was now trying to use what he'd been through to help other kids. That showed he had truly healed. "Aiden, we are so proud of you," I told him, hugging my grandson close. Our relationship, having gotten through so much, had become even deeper. This was the real win. Looking at Aiden's happy expression, my heartfelt thoughts were filled with gratitude. This is where our fresh start truly commences. I'm incredibly thankful, so very thankful. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 35, employed as an accountant. Life's a roller coaster, they say, and it's absolutely applicable to mine. 5 years back, my destiny took a turn at a coffee shop near me. Normally, my usual seat was occupied, forcing me to sit beside a person I didn't know. He started talking, mentioning how excellent the latte was there. That was the start of everything. The man's name was Mark Miller. He was 37 and an established architect. I instantly connected with his kind demeanor and intelligent personality. Mark proposed marriage using a quote from a movie, "You had me at hello." It was remarkably romantic. Our wedding was intimate but beautiful. Our early married life was wonderful, both of us succeeding professionally and experiencing genuine happiness. Then in our second year, we got some unexpected news. I was expecting a baby. Mark and I were overwhelmed with delight, shedding tears of happiness. "What a gift to be expecting. We're getting a new life," Mark said happily. While I felt anxious during the pregnancy, Mark's constant help got me through everything. Finally, the day of delivery arrived. The labor was more painful than I had anticipated, but when Emily was born, it was all worth it. The promise to shield her and make her joyful came instantly when her tiny hand was in mine. Emily's arrival completely revolutionized our existence. The late-night feedings, changing diapers, and all those nights without proper sleep. But whenever we saw Emily's smile, it erased all the exhaustion. Mark would sometimes say, "Doesn't Emily have fingers exactly like ours?" And it's true, they did. "She'll be as gorgeous as you, without a doubt." Through those types of discussions, our new family started to form. Emily's development brought us new happiness daily. Her first time rolling over, her first words spoken, and those first tentative steps. Each instance felt like a small wonder, and we carefully documented all those cherished memories. Mark frequently commented, "Sarah, you're an incredible mother." Those comments were heartwarming, especially when I was worn out. Little did we know, this joyful time would soon introduce our family to a difficult challenge. Just 3 months after Emily was born, my maternity leave was drawing to a close. Should I go back to my job, or should I devote myself entirely to raising her? This decision would have serious and unexpected implications that I couldn't have foreseen then. Returning to my job was something I felt strongly about. I really didn't want to abandon my profession as an accountant, and realistically, we needed my salary. Raising Emily would be hard on Mark's income alone. However, when I thought about leaving Emily, I felt a pang in my heart. Was it acceptable to leave a 3-month-old with someone else? Wouldn't she miss me terribly? These anxieties kept swirling in my thoughts. After a lot of thought, I talked it over with Mark. Sarah, your work is important. I felt a surge of bravery as Mark reassured me. We'd solve this, he said. Ultimately, I made up my mind to go back to my job. Initially, though, I opted for working a limited schedule a few days weekly rather than the typical full-time commitment. I was lucky. My employer was accommodating and approved this plan. A fresh issue surfaced, though. We needed to get someone to look after Emily. It turned out it was impossible to locate a daycare facility that would take a baby that young, and a babysitter would have been too costly for us. That's when Mark offered an idea. He suggested that maybe we ask my mom. Frankly, at first I had some doubts. I hadn't exactly cultivated a strong connection with my mother-in-law, Judith. However, with no other available solutions, we chose to reach out to Judith. She had recently finished working and had quite a bit of free time. When we detailed the situation to her on the phone, Judith promptly agreed, which caught me off guard. Caring for my granddaughter, there's nothing that could make me happier, Judith told me, and that calmed some of my apprehension. Nevertheless, I still had a small, persistent fear. I worried about whether Judith would really be able to give Emily the care she needed. A week before I was scheduled to return to work, Judith came over to our house. At 62, Judith was small in stature, but she projected confidence. Her hair, now turning gray, was pulled back tightly, and her clothing was perfectly ironed. Please take good care of her, Judith, I told her, and she gave a slight smile, responding, Oh, Sarah, no need to be so formal, just call me Mom. Hearing that made me a little uncomfortable, but for the sake of avoiding conflict, I resolved to do as she asked. Right away, Judith started looking over every inch of the house. Everything needed to be arranged and placed in a certain way to maximize effectiveness, she told us constantly. She also had a lot of thoughts about how we were raising our child. You're changing diapers the wrong way, the timing of her feedings is wrong, you need to be tougher when putting her to bed. Each thing Judith said gradually eroded my self-assurance. Mark would reassure me, Mom's been through this, she probably has good reasons for saying those things, but I just heard it as negativity. Despite this, I needed Judith's support so I could go back to my job. So I made up my mind to just put up with it. The day before my return to work, I gave Judith really specific directions. I told her where Emily's favorite toy was, what toys she liked, her usual routines, and her particular likes and dislikes. Judith listened quietly, but when I was finished, she said, Don't stress, I can handle this. That night, I shared my anxieties with Mark. Is Judith really going to be all right? Is she going to take good care of Emily? Mark put his arms around me and said, Everything will be okay. Mom can be tough, but she always puts the kids first. Let's believe her. The next morning, I walked away from the house feeling downhearted. Looking back, I saw Judith holding Emily near the front door. Have a good day, she called. Don't worry, Judith added, and that gave me a little peace of mind. However, I couldn't imagine how those next few weeks would impact our family. After I'd been back at work for several weeks, I started to grasp more about who Judith really was and where she came from. As I listened to Mark and Judith's offhand remarks, I began piecing together bits and pieces about her past. Judith entered the world in the 1960s, raised by a stern military man for a dad and a mom who stayed home. Her upbringing occurred within a very structured home. The family's values prioritized controlling feelings and prized order. I understood that this upbringing significantly shaped how Judith cared for Emily. She stressed rigid routines and didn't quickly go to Emily when she cried. Let her be, she'd say. You can't coddle her. Emily also appeared to be having a difficult time with Judith being around. Typically not hesitant around others, Emily frequently started bawling in Judith's presence. Following a few weeks, some small alterations started showing up in Emily's conduct. She always used to light up and grin when she saw me in the mornings, but lately she looked blank. She also cried more during the evenings and struggled to fall asleep. Recognizing these shifts, I felt increasingly uneasy and torn. Was something off with Emily? Were Judith's methods of childcare possibly creating a problem? These questions consistently filled my thoughts. Even when I talked to Mark, he'd simply respond with, Trust Mom. I began to feel frustrated with Mark because he didn't seem to grasp my worries. Mark, something is wrong with Emily. Don't you think there might be an issue with the way Judith is parenting? Sarah, Mom knows what she's doing. Don't you think I'm making too big a deal out of things? With these kinds of discussions happening again and again, the strain in my marriage started to grow. One Friday night, I got home from my job sooner than I usually did. When I got there, the house felt strangely quiet. There was no answer when I called out Emily. Fueled by worry, I started to look around the house and heard a quiet, strange sound coming from the bedroom. As I pushed the door open, the scene in front of me chilled me to the bone. Emily was in her crib, but her body was completely wrapped up in soft towels. She was yelling and her face was flushed. And Judith was just sitting on the couch watching television. "What in the world are you doing?" I yelled. Judith, looking completely unconcerned, said, "This is the most effective way. I can relax and Emily is safe." I instantly grabbed Emily and unwrapped the towels that were holding her. When I checked Emily's body, I saw small bruises on her arms and legs, likely from the binding. "Why on earth did you do this?" I challenged Judith, and she answered in a composed tone, "You're too soft." She added that discipline is important. At that instant, Emily's body abruptly became rigid and she began to shake. Her eyes rolled upwards and her breaths got shorter. "Emily. Emily," I called my daughter's name desperately, but Emily didn't respond. Panicked, I quickly called 911. "This is an emergency. My 3-month-old is having a seizure. Her breathing. As I followed the operator's advice, I kept Emily close to me. When the ambulance sirens grew louder, Judith was still on the couch. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Sarah." Judith mumbled, "That's just how we raised kids back when I was growing up." I looked at her, and I saw that she genuinely didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. The paramedics arrived, and they quickly placed Emily on a stretcher. I climbed into the ambulance with her, but the fear and worry I experienced right then were beyond words. Watching Emily's little body keep shaking, I went to the hospital, praying silently. The emergency room at the hospital was total pandemonium. Emily was rushed away to the treatment area right away, and I stayed in the waiting room, shaking from fear. Mark showed up half an hour later. "Sarah, what's happening?" he asked, rushing over, breathless. I explained everything while I cried. I could see Mark's face twisting with both rage and fear. After about an hour, the doctor came to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, we need to speak with you," he said, and we were brought into a tiny consultation room. "Your daughter's condition is now stable," the doctor started. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief, but the doctor still looked serious. "Nonetheless, our thorough examination indicates the potential for severe brain injury." As soon as I heard those words, I felt my entire world collapse. I could feel Mark holding my hand very tightly, but all other feelings seemed to disappear. The doctor continued, "We've also discovered evidence of prolonged abuse. Do you have any knowledge of this?" We didn't know what to say. We debated if we should even mention Judith, but eventually we chose to lay everything bare. The doctor listened intently, looking very solemn, and told us they'd have to notify Child Protective Services. Right then we heard some noise out in the hall. Opening the door, there was Judith, encircled by nurses. "I have the right to see my granddaughter," she was yelling. Staring daggers at the doctor, Judith exclaimed, "I haven't done anything wrong." When Mark tried to step in, Judith snapped, "This is because you pamper her too much." Security was summoned, and Judith was escorted out of the hospital. Still, the whole scene left a painful mark on our hearts. All of a sudden, Emily's future, our family connections, and our marriage were all in question. A few weeks have gone by since Emily came home from the hospital. Things at home have been much tougher than we anticipated. Emily's needs were totally different from before, now requiring constant care and rehab every day. Mark and I were wiped out every single day, trying to balance work with all of Emily's therapy sessions. One evening after Emily had gone to sleep, we sat down in the living room, facing each other. Mark's exhaustion was written all over his face. "Sarah," he said, "we can't keep going like this. We need to decide what to do." I nodded in agreement. "But what do we do?" I asked, and Mark let out a huge sigh. "As I see it, we really have two choices. One is to sue my mother. The other is—" he paused. "The other is," I urged, and Mark went on, his voice filled with difficulty, "to try and fix things to be a family again." I was consumed with a burning rage when I heard those words. "Reconcile? After what she did to our daughter, there's no way that's going to happen." "I understand, Sarah," Mark said softly, "but Mom had her own problems." He cited her difficult childhood and the things she'd been through. "That's not good enough," I cut in. "Emily's life has been destroyed." Everything went quiet. After a bit, Mark spoke again. "Sarah, our marriage is also at risk." I was feeling overwhelmed by the constant tension. Hearing that snapped me back to the present moment. It was true. In the last few weeks, we'd been pointing fingers and fighting more and more. I asked in a whisper, "What should we do then?" Mark reached for my hand. "First, let's get therapy just for us. Then let's figure out the best path for Emily. Whether we pursue legal options or try to find some common ground, we'd figure it out together." That night, we talked for hours. We discussed Emily's future, our family ties, and our marriage. As the sun began to come up, we'd finally reached an agreement. We were on the same page that we had to focus on Emily's well-being. And to do that, we had to become stronger as individuals and as a couple. After we'd been in counseling for a month, we decided to see a lawyer. We felt we needed to take legal action to safeguard Emily and hopefully prevent this from ever happening again. We laid out the entire story in the lawyer's office. She listened carefully, jotting down notes every so often. When we were done, she quietly began to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, this is definitely a severe case of child abuse," she said. The possibility of criminal charges hung in the air, legally speaking. Watching his expression twist at that pronouncement, I instinctively clasped Mark's hand. We knew, even though it was tough to accept, this was what Emily needed. The attorney went on to suggest, since this involved family, that we attempt mediation as a first step. If that didn't fix the problem, then we'd have to proceed with a court battle. We exchanged a glance and gave a shared nod of agreement. "Let's go with mediation," Mark said. The next week we set up a family meeting, and that included Judith. Judith arrived, flanked by her attorney, and the air crackled with tension. The session was unbelievably hard. Judith initially tried to defend herself, but when confronted with the facts, her demeanor slowly shifted. "I might have been mistaken," Judith mumbled, and the room fell quiet. Following that, we discussed Judith needing professional counseling to address her actions. Emily's visits would only be permitted under supervision initially, and Judith would also be responsible for some of Emily's past and future medical costs. Furthermore, all of us, the entire family, would be going to therapy on a regular basis. We came to an accord on all those terms. The court approved a formal, written settlement, yet that was merely the initial step. Emily was attending rehabilitation in the pediatric neurology ward 3 times a week. The timetable was packed, with speech therapy plus occupational and physical therapy sessions. Emily made slow, steady advancements, eventually starting to speak actual words. Mark and I had our hands full trying to juggle our jobs with our recovery. Thankfully, both of our jobs were very accommodating and let us have flexible schedules. However, it was inevitable that we'd become exhausted. We were also still attending family therapy sessions on a regular basis. In the beginning, it felt a little uncomfortable, but as we went to more sessions, we started to grasp what everyone was feeling. Judith showed a really big change after that, too. She genuinely participated in the therapy and confronted her past. "Now I see how awful what I did was," she said with tears in her eyes. Mark looked at her with a complicated look on his face. As for me, I was wrestling with feelings of guilt. The thought of if only I'd realized sooner would sometimes consume me. The therapist kept telling me, "You're a victim, not the one at fault," but it took a while before I could fully believe it. Going through all of this brought me closer to Mark as well. Because we admitted our flaws and were there for each other, we got even closer. We also started going to a support group in our area. It really helped to be able to talk with other families who were going through something similar. The feeling of, we aren't alone, really helped us stay strong. When Emily turned 2, her improvement was even better than the doctors predicted. There were still a bunch of tough times to come, but it was obvious that we could see some light. It's possible this whole process will never completely be over. Even as we gradually progress, we found our family's inner fortitude again. Emily turned 5. The backyard is alive with dancing, bright balloons, and joyous sounds. She's happily talking with all of her friends. Her speech is now fluid because of the therapy she's had. She still struggles sometimes, but she gets around in her wheelchair all by herself. Her gaze is sharp and intelligent, taking in everything. Mark and I thought back to the past few years. They'd been tough, but there were also a lot of amazing things and happy moments. Judith's here at the party too. Seeing her, we understand that people are capable of evolving. It makes us happy to watch her interact carefully but warmly with her granddaughter. Life is unpredictable, but that's what makes it so wonderful, and Judith's words really stick with me. Mark's brothers and sisters are here too, as part of the family. Those old disagreements are now solid connections. Our marriage has grown closer because of all this. Getting through the hard times has made our love and trust stronger. Emily's development has shown us so much. Despite her challenges, she's developing her own special gifts. She writes poetry beautifully and is good at using computers. We've started helping out at groups for people facing similar situations, using what we've learned to offer support. Helping other families facing similar challenges has also brought us a sense of recovery. I'm so happy to belong to this group. Emily spoke these words softly just before extinguishing her birthday candles. We were unable to stop the tears from welling up as she spoke. My life, in fact, has taken a completely different path than I ever anticipated. Yet, what we've gained from all of this is more valuable than words can express. The deep connections within our family, the impact of forgiveness, and the necessity of optimism. All of these things give me the power to handle anything. I'm not sure what lies ahead, but now I'm certain of something. This family will be able to get through anything, no matter what hurdles come our way. With that firmly in mind, we keep going. Watching Emily's happy expression, I silently committed myself to something.